Hey there, and welcome to another segment of Coffee Talk. Joining us today is Beth Fitch, founder, partner at Righi Fitch Law Group. With over 32 years of civil defense experience, Beth counsels accounting firms and other professional service firms on cyber liability and insurance issues, data privacy, cyber risk management, and risk transfer strategies, and cybersecurity best practices. Welcome, Beth. We are honored to have you and join us for Coffee Talk today.
Great to be here.
Cyber stories. I'm sure you've been through some scenarios out there. I mean, Cyberwar Stories, what happens when you get hit by a cyber attack? This is the worst case scenario. You've been in the trenches with customers. You've seen the looks on their faces when it does happen. What about accounting firms? What makes them so vulnerable to cyber attacks? And we brushed on that, but what is the impact when they get hit, and what happens, both on a professional level and a personal level, to these firms?
Yeah. So the two biggest risks and the two biggest issues that I do see with accounting firms are one, reputational harm, and two, operational disruption. And the reputational harm is that accounting and CPAs in general, you are, I should say, the clients, the customers' trusted advisor. They're turning over to you their confidential financial information that they don't want their competitors to see, they don't want their clients to see, they don't want most of their employees to see. That financial data is so valuable to your clients. So you're selling not only that you're very capable, but you're selling trust. So if you have to tell your clients that there has been an exfiltration of data, or if you have to tell them that we can't get your tax returns done on time because our operations has been disrupted by ransomware and our data is all encrypted. If you have to do that, that is going to substantially affect your reputation. And while they may stay with you for a short term, you may very well lose a good portion of your client base. And what does happen is not only does that affect your immediate clients, but if they're really upset, and let me tell you, I've seen where clients of ZBA firms have been really upset when they can't get their tax returns filed, they can't get their refunds, confidential financial data is out there. They get really upset, and if they get angry enough, you can be sure social media, you are going to see your social media posts through whatever source out there about, how you fail to protect their confidential information. So that's one. Two is it's a disruption of our operations in two tangible ways. One is if you've had a wire fraud transfer out of your own accounts, you have no cash flow. How are you going to pay your employees? How are you going to pay your vendors if you have no money in your account? So that's one. And two, how are you going to function if you have no ability to function because your entire system has been shut down? So the one little piece of advice is backups. Just make sure you are well backed up in a variety of different ways so that at least you can get your backups so that you can function. So that's probably point one, is make sure you have backup. And then two, if you're using vendors, you need to carefully vet your vendors because vendors can be your weakest link as well.
What about the firms themselves when they get it? What happens? If you're, I'm sure you've been on the receiving end of a call of an accounting firm that just was recently hit. You're probably dealing with the business owner or upper management. I mean, what's going on in their world on a personal level, professional level? I mean, it just kind of brings us into that reality of you just got hit. What's going on?
Panic and chaos. That's what's going on. Panic and chaos. So if you don't, on the front end, have an incident response team, it's absolute chaos. if you have an incident response team, plan and have an incident response team that has worked the plan, tested the plan, and know what happens when a cybersecurity incident occurs, and everyone knows what their roles are and responsibility, there's less chaos, but there's still panic. So the most important thing to do as soon as you have a cybersecurity incident, no matter what it is, you're going to, one, contact your breach coach, which is typically lawyers. I'm a breach coach. That's typically the breach coach, which is your quarterback. So if you have an incident response plan, you've tested it out, and you have your quarterback, the panic goes down as soon as you get them on the phone, because I'm the quarterback. I'm going to take over. I'm going to figure out as much information as I can, and then I'm going to bring in a forensic expert. I may need to bring in a public relations expert, and we'll just see where else we need to draw from in order to quickly stand you up and mobilize. We're going to notify your insurance carrier right away. So there are immediate steps, and the first one is to call your breach coach. And my job as a breach coach is to bring calm to the chaos. That's literally what I do.
And also communicate with your customer. Of course, let them know what's going on here. It's hiding underneath a mountain somewhere is not going to make the problem go away. You've got to face it dead on.
Yes and no to that. So let me put just
okay.
a little bit. Okay, so yes and no, because there is, especially with CPAs, what I find with CPAs is that CPAs tend to be rule followers. CPAs tend to be more transparent than other industries. So the initial response is, we need to tell our clients right away. I would counsel against that, because you don't know what you don't know. So you don't want to be communicating out ever to your clients or customers about some cybersecurity incident when you don't really know what's happened. So you don't want to communicate right away. And it just depends on how well you can function. So the first thing to do is get your breach coach, notify your cyber carrier, and then we're going to come in and figure out, can you operate without, in the circumstances you are, can you operate? Is there an alternative way to operate quickly so that it doesn't appear externally that anything is amiss? If something is amiss and there's no way to figure out what to do to stand you up right away, to correct the situation, at that point, we need to craft a message that goes out to the customer, the client. You have to craft a very careful message. Now we get PR firms involved from the very beginning if we have to communicate it out. The other thing that I always hear is, well, of course, we're just going to notify law enforcement right away. No, we do not notify law enforcement right away, because once you notify law enforcement, that triggers timing of when you have to notify others. You don't want to notify the FBI or local law enforcement. First of all, local law enforcement really isn't going to ever help you anyway. And the FBI tends to be more one way. They're looking for information from you. They're not going to fix your problems for you. They do have some tools that we can use, but they're not there to fix your problems. They're there to catch bad guys. So we don't notify law enforcement right away. We make a thoughtful decision about the timing of that, and a thoughtful decision about when we're going to notify clients and customers, and what that's going to look like.
And that leads right into, recovering from a cyber attack is obviously having a plan in place, well thought out, drilled, preferably way before a cyber attack happens, while you're thinking clearly. You bring the right people to the table. You think of the incident all the way through, testing your disaster recovery plan, and really test it on a technical level. Assume nothing and verify everything. Verify those backups are good. don't trust in this case. This is too important. Verify everything and making sure your team is well abreast, up to speed on what's going on. What are some ways to minimize risk? I mean, it's a loaded question, but I mean, cybersecurity, how can you minimize your risk in this situation? Or is there?
Well, I think there's a number of ways of minimizing risk. So first of all, you need to train your employees. I think 35% of all scams, cybersecurity incidents are a result of human error. And that human error is because humans are easily manipulated by threat actors. Threat actors spend every day and in every way trying to manipulate humans. And CPA firms in particular tend to have employees who want to be helpful. It's a helpful culture. And so it's easier for threat actors to manipulate employees in a helpful culture. And so that's a lot of the targeting is through links, through emails, just requesting information for pressure, putting pressure on employees. There's lots of ways to use our own human condition to manipulate employees to, unfortunately, send information or click links. And so it's really important to train your employees on social engineering. And there's a number of ways you can do that. But you need to train and you need to retrain. And again, you can also, as you said, Chris, you can verify. There's pen testing, which is a way to test your employees. You can deploy a fake email scheme to see, if they click the box. I will tell you that when we do those, there is always 10 to 20% that click the box that they shouldn't be clicking, and usually it's senior management. So. But once you test and verify, it's in that debrief where it really begins to sink in. So the best in terms on the front end, you can eliminate 35% of your risk if you train your employees. Then I think getting someone in to look at your IT system, because that's the technical vulnerabilities are another 30%. So making sure you have someone looked at your system, because what I see is that anyone can be an IT vendor. Anyone who has just a little bit of skill. So if your brother Charlie is your IT vendor, or if your cousin Sarah is your IT vendor, and you haven't carefully vetted them, this could be problematic for you and you really should, and I'm not saying you can't continue to use them as your vendor, but what you should do is get a third party who has sophistication, a forensics IT company who can come in and do the pen testing and just scan your system, scan it to see, where your vulnerabilities are. And you can then make a decision, like a risk-benefit decision. Which ones do we really need to correct? Which ones are such low probability of risk that we're going to ignore that because the cost of correcting it may be too high. So, but just on the front end, training your employees, having an incident response, doing a tabletop or trying out your incident response, and then checking your administrative controls and technical controls are really, really important. And that will minimize risk. You also need to be looking not only at your IT vendor, but any vendors. What is their cybersecurity? Because your vendor can be your weakest link. And maybe, because I am a dinosaur and have been in it for 10 years, but maybe you'll remember the Target breach. It was one of the biggest breaches at the time. Well, that was an HVAC vendor who had access to their system because they monitor their HVAC system. So you probably have perhaps a payroll vendor. You might have an IT vendor. You might be using software that has apps. If you're using software that has apps, have you actually asked good questions about whether the apps have been tested for vulnerabilities? So you don't have to be an IT expert, but when you're talking to your vendors, you need to just ask some really good questions. And and get responses in layman's normal language. I do not profess to be a technical expert, and I hear a lot of tech talk, and I need people like Chris to dumb that down for me. And that's what I say. I'm not a tech expert. So if you can't dumb it down for me, if you can't explain to me in basic common parlance of what you're doing to ensure that your system is cyber secure, they're probably not the right vendor. And the same about apps. Are you using apps? What have they done? Do they have insurance? Have they ever had a breach before? What was the nature of the breach? How did you remedy that breach? What is their incident response plan? Just whatever you're asking yourself, you should be asking your vendors. And then you can use, and another way to you can risk transfer to your vendors. A really solid, clear, enforceable defense and indemnity language in a contract will protect you. Making sure they name you as an additional insured on their policy can protect you. It shift risk.
I think a lot of folks, they put IT in the same bucket and they think it's all the same. And just like us IT people put accounting and all accounting related things in the same bucket. There's a big difference between tax and audit. And there's a big difference between systems engineers and security engineers. I think that there's a big disconnect there. So maybe you're exactly right. The person that builds great workstations and servers and maybe has been helping with some of your break fix problems may or may not be the best security expert. And it's really about hiring the right expert for the problem, just like cyber insurance and dealing with attorneys and hiring the right attorney that understands this very complex world. And trust, trust but verify is the key here. Thank you, Beth, for sharing your experience and your expertise on this important topic. And for those who are still with us, thank you for joining us today. If you would like more tips and best practices from the experts, please like and subscribe and more videos. Cheers.